This is the story of a farmer boy who demonstrated exceptional talent from a very young age. He had the ability to disassemble and reassemble a pocket watch with all its intricate parts and make it work perfectly. However, tragedy struck when he was just 12 years old. He became an orphan and had to fend for himself. At the age of 16, with limited education, he left behind his life as a farmer and embarked on a journey to the city of Detroit to work as a laborer in a ship factory. So, how did this unfortunate boy manage to build the world's largest automotive empire, register over 161 patents, and revolutionize the world forever? Find out exactly what he did to become the most influential man of the 20th century. We'll explain it to you next. In the 1860s, in the United States, the man who would transform the world completely was about to be born. Henry Ford was born in 1863 in a small farmhouse on the outskirts of Michigan, in the town of Dearborn. He had an unfortunate childhood. His mother died during the birth of his younger brother, and at the tender age of 12, young Henry Ford became an orphan. It's said that as he received the news of his mother's death and witnessed her passing, a steam-powered machine was passing by on the road, the first motorized machine his young eyes had ever seen. Many psychologists have questioned the possible impact of this event on the mind of the 12-year-old Henry Ford, suggesting it might have been a way for him to cope emotionally with the tragic news. From that moment, the life of young Henry Ford would never be the same. At 16, he traveled to Detroit and found work at the Detroit Dry Dock Company, a ship manufacturing company. There, he had the opportunity to work with steam-powered machines as a helper to the mechanics. 3 years later, at the age of 19, Ford left his job at this company and began working for the Westinghouse Company, where he repaired various steam-powered machines. In 1891, now married, young Ford settled in Detroit and found work at the Edison Illuminating Company. He quickly rose through the ranks. With the arrival of his first child in 1893, Henry Ford decided to create his own prototype of an automobile. He built an improvised vehicle in his home. It consisted of 4 bicycle wheels connected by an improvised gasoline engine. This model could reach a top speed of 35 kilometers per hour and was capable of driving, turning, braking, and changing speeds. Henry Ford had built his first car just 4 years before the world entered the 1900s. A year later, with several sponsors, the Detroit Automobile Company was born. However, it failed to secure the necessary capital for car production, and Ford also struggled to convince people that they no longer had to rely on horse-drawn transport. Nonetheless, Ford persisted and decided to create a faster car, a racing car. He was passionate about speed and car racing, hoping that racing would spark interest in people to explore and acquire automobiles as a new form of transportation. However, his sponsors were not supportive of his racing passion. They wanted him to focus solely on car manufacturing and not dedicate time to racing. As a result, his sponsors abandoned him. Ford took his cars to the streets, showcasing them to the world. His cars were becoming faster and faster, and he cultivated a racing culture that captured people's attention. This fame attracted the interest of other investors, leading to the founding of the Ford Motor Company. He hired and trained staff, produced a new car model, and exhibited it at a location separate from the factory, much like modern car dealerships. In 1903, Ford sold his first car, known as the Model A. Within a year, more than 500 Model A cars had been sold. Until then, Henry Ford had not been wealthy and was careful with money. It was at this moment that he decided to celebrate by buying his first formal suit and took a photo with his young son. Now, at the peak of his nearly 40 years, he was about to unleash an unprecedented movement in this new automotive industry. Many advised him to create a luxury car, and although he did so, Ford's vision wasn't limited to serving only the wealthy. Reflecting on his life on the farm, he imagined how an automobile would have made his father's and his own life easier, transporting countless things from one place to another without depending on horse-drawn carts. Ford's idea was to make the automobile accessible to everyone. And so, the Model T was born in 1908, a car that was affordable to the general public, lightweight yet with a large carrying capacity. It was a sensation. Orders poured in, and despite his best efforts, Ford was forced to announce that he couldn't take any more orders. Ford's workforce was pushed to their limits, working 12-hour shifts with minimal breaks. It was all about work. However, producing a car for the masses brought about a problem. How could Ford satisfy the overwhelming demand for automobiles? At this crucial moment, Ford demonstrated his ingenuity in leadership. He already had a group of engineers working for him, and together they created a completely revolutionary method, a method that could meet the demands of these orders. They moved away from manufacturing on workbenches and introduced assembly line production. Mass production had been born. The Ford Motor Company could now produce 25 Model Ts per day using teams of engineers and assistants working along the assembly line. On average, it took a man 12 hours to manufacture a Model T using the old method, but with the new assembly line method, it only took 5 hours. A year later, this was reduced to just 90 minutes. As a result, costs were significantly reduced. Ford had cracked the solution to the problem, and he would continue to solve many more. However, he would soon face another challenge. The small company General Motors was already producing cars, and they were designing them with interiors. Meanwhile, Henry Ford continued to produce the Model T for 20 years with few significant changes. Taking sound advice from his son, Edsel Ford, who belonged to a different generation where times had changed, Ford realized that people were now demanding not only utility but also style. As a result, Ford began introducing changes in features, design, and improvements in the functions of his cars every year. This marked the era of automobile model renovations. Ford began offering roomier rear seats, suspension improvements for a more comfortable ride, and more powerful engines with the introduction of the V8 engine. These cars could reach speeds exceeding 140 km per hour. They were powerful, robust, fast, and well-built. They required less maintenance compared to General Motors cars. With the substantial profits accumulated through the success of the Ford Motor Company, Henry Ford expanded his endeavors. He ventured into a complex industrial complex known as the River Rouge Complex, and he acquired a significant share of newspaper publishers. Ford also wielded influence over newspapers and magazines to disseminate his opinions nationwide. Among the curiosities of Ford's life, he received praise for his cars from several prominent figures of the time and maintained close friendships with U.S. presidents. He produced jeeps, military vehicles, and even cargo planes. The Ford empire still stands today, remaining one of the world's leading automotive companies. Clearly presented by Chronicles of Greatness. Thanks for getting here. I hope you liked the video. If so, don't forget to subscribe and leave your like. This was featured by Chronicles of Greatness. Until next time.